power is not only addictive and seductive, it is corrosive. In the last number of years, there have been a number of horrifying scandals in the church. Why should the church not have been the first to expose the darkness? We all think the same thing. If I had more power, that would be a good thing, because I would only use power in the best way and for the most good. But what we have to wrestle with as apprentices of Jesus is, why didn't he come in power? Why didn't he show up in Athens, the intellectual power capital of the world? Why didn't he show up in Rome, the military power and political power of the world? Why didn't he appear displaying his might and flaunting his authority? Why did the greatest king of all choose to arrive not forcefully, but feebly? See, what we have to wrestle with is this, that Jesus did not choose to power up. If anybody could have, he could have. But the way of the manger is not the way of changing the world from the top down. Before he ever launched his public ministry, he met and he refused that approach. The enemy took him to the top of a mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world, said, you can have all of them if you'll just worship me. It wasn't a lame promise. He could have delivered. Jesus could have been recognized as king of the world, and he could have run the world any way he wanted. Just think of all the good Jesus could have done with all that power. But he said no. And intentionally decided that he would not bring the kingdom down by powering up. Several centuries ago, Martin Luther wrote, the true Christian religion does not begin at the top as all other religions do. It begins at the bottom. You must run directly to the manger and to the mother's womb. But we don't want to, because power is so addictive and it's so seductive. And it's just so tempting to believe that any desired destination I want requires taking a power trip. If I really want the life that I want, I need some more power. It's like the story of the boy that had written Santa a couple of years in a row and still hadn't gotten to everything he wanted. So he said, I'm going to the top. And he wrote God, Dear God, I have been good all the time and I want all my presents. Well, he thought and scratched that sentence out. Dear God, I have been good most of the time and I would like most of my presents. He thought and scratched that sentence out. Dear God, I have been good some of the time and I would like some of my presents. He thought some more. And he saw the nativity by the family Christmas tree and went and grabbed baby Jesus and wrote, Dear God, if you ever want to see your son again. That's how we think we get what we want. We find a way to leverage and manipulate power. But Christmas calls us to view power through the lens of the way of the manger. And I'm not saying that apprentices of Jesus should never seek positions of leadership and influence. What I'm saying is that if we get in those positions, we don't operate the way of Herod, forcing conformity to our ideas and views from the top down. Now, this has always been a struggle for the church. That our intention might be good. We want the world to be better. And so we're going to make the world be better. We need more media power. We need more marketplace and financial power. And most tempting of all, we need more political power. Let's get Christians in power and we will make people be better. And what happens is that rather than converting the system corrupts the Christians. Because power is not only addictive and seductive, it is corrosive. Think about it. In the last number of years, there have been a number of horrifying scandals in the church involving abuse. Scandals that have eroded the trust of many. Why should the church not have been the first to confess her sins, to tell the truth, and to expose the darkness? But too often the narrative was, no, let's cover up and let's hide our sin because confession might cause us to lose influence and power. This was a mistake the very first disciples of Jesus made. They're walking down the road and two brothers, James and John, walk up next to Jesus and say, hey, when you're on top, when you have all the authority, can we be next in power? And Jesus immediately thought, this is a stop-down moment. And he got everyone all together. And he said, you know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. Jesus is not going to endorse or teach us how to win at the power game the world plays. Remember, the kingdom cannot come through us in a way that is different than the king came to us. The Christmas story rebukes the power up approach and calls us to power down. What does that mean? It means first that we believe that right makes might. See, Satan is too clever just to try to tempt us to think the goal is just to acquire might, that the win is just to see how much might you can get. No, what he does is he seduces us into thinking, if I had the might, I would make things right. It's the way of Herod sanitized, not the way of the manger. Jesus wouldn't go that way. Well, of course, you say he wouldn't accept kingdoms from Herod. He wouldn't accept kingdoms from anyone. The people tried to come and force him to become king, and he said, no. Why? Why will Jesus not rule from the top down? It's because he knows that approach never changes hearts. Raw power can produce capitulation, but it cannot produce willing transformation. Now, every parent here knows this. You can force your children into the behavior you want, but you can't force them to want to behave that way when your back is turned. Jesus knew the only way to transform people from the inside was bottom up. And so Jesus changed hearts by feeding the hungry, washing feet, praying for other people, even his enemies. And he gave this foundational kingdom ethic for changing the world. He said, do to others whatever you'd like them to do to you. And this is how the first Christians changed the world. They had no political power. They had no economic power. They had no status. But they overcame the mightiest and most powerful empire the world had ever seen. How? Well, if you were hungry, they made sure you had something to eat. And if you had nothing to wear, they'd go give you something of theirs. And if they found a baby out in the dump, they'd pick it up and bring it home and adopt it. And in a world where the sexual ethic was all about power, the Christians said no. We will keep sex holy between a husband and a wife in marriage, and we will not treat women like objects, but like people of dignity. And this is how they changed the world, from the bottom up. You may remember about 10 or 12 years ago in East Texas, there was a controversy in Henderson County. They were going to put a nativity scene in front of the courthouse, and a man in San Antonio filed a lawsuit. He was an atheist activist named Patrick Green. And, of course, that made people in that little town of Athens very angry. But then they found out that Patrick Green was about to lose his job as a cab driver because he had a detached retina and he couldn't pay for it. And so people there in the church in that little town began sending him money to pay for his operation. Now, they weren't the only ones, but they were the main ones. And he was stunned. He said, I couldn't believe it. Christians are acting like Jesus said they're supposed to act. Not only did he retract his lawsuit, but the next year he paid for the star to put on the nativity set. You see, followers of Jesus do not force their way of life on others, but they force others to acknowledge that their way of life blesses the world. And who can I bless is a much more powerful way to change the world than who can I boss.